Welcome to the Eye on Annapolis Local Business Spotlight. There are thousands of locally owned businesses in the area, some small and some large. Some you may know and others you don't. But one thing they all have in common is a great story, and we want to share it with you. Join us every Saturday as we talk to the founders, the owners, and the managers of local businesses you have come to know and love, and those you will come to know and love. Now here's your host, John Frenay, with this week's Local Business Spotlight.
Well, I'll tell you, many folks here know our guest on the podcast today, but probably in a much different light. You may have been seeing him with a bright light hanging over you, maybe. I know he's probably put a couple stitches in my kids' faces or arms or hands at some point in time. But we're here speaking with Dr. Bob Graw, who founded Nighttime Pediatrics way back in the day. I can guarantee you that this podcast is not about medicine. And it's a second career, I guess, if you will. But you are the owner of Bowtie Bisons, which is a farm right up here in Davidsonville on right at the corner of St. George Barber and Rutland Road.
Rutland Road, right.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me out here. And I've got to say that about the last 10 years, I've seen the bison, just sort of always wondered. I just figured it was just somebody that had a couple bison or something like that. I didn't realize that it was quite the operation that it is. So I'm really excited to learn, what it's all about here. I guess before we get into the bison thing, but how do we make the jump from pediatrics to livestock?
Well, it never was a jump. It was always an evolution. When we opened our pediatric office in Davidsonville, we had animals, and I put animals there for the kids. There were cows and goats and sheep and that kind of thing running around. And at one time we had geese and chickens and guinea hens all in the parking lot. They were all roaming around. And then we got some peacocks, and we had a peacock group, which we still have up in front of the office. So all the people would come for a visit, but they loved the animals. In the first office we had just 1,000 square feet. There were standard casement windows with windowsills. And I would walk in the room, and the parents would have their toddlers standing on the windowsill ledge, and the mother would be reading a magazine across the room. And I said, oh my gosh, this is terrible. So we remodeled our office. We put floor-to-ceiling windows and then brought different kinds of cattle in so they could see a brown cow and a black and white cow or whatever it might be. And many of the kids that came originally didn't know that it wasn't a dog. They'd say to the mother, is that a dog? And this big cow would come up and moo, and they'd be eating their hay right in front of them in the window. So that's how it started. And we had cattle around, and Alberto, who's sitting here with me, has helped us manage this farm for 30 years, right? And in the process, a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, right, a fellow used to transport our animals to the market or would bring us new ones. And he asked Alberto if we'd ever be interested in bison. And we said, yeah, that'd be fun. Yeah, let's try a bison or two. See what it's like. Yeah, should be easy, right? Exactly, right? And so they called up and they said they'd come in the fall and give us 2 females and a male. The male would come from North Dakota, and the females would come from the Southwest, so they wouldn't be inbreeding within their own little culture. And so they called up and they said, well, the animals are so big now, why don't we bring it in the spring? And so we sat, and Easter Sunday they call up and they say, can we bring the bison over today? And they pull up with their trailer, nice enough, long trailer. We open the trailer back, and they jump out and start just running. By 30 or 40 minutes, they just ran around the circle, hit the fence, did this, did that. And we thought, well, that's interesting. And that's how we started learning about buffalo. And we asked the fellow who brought them over. Alberto had built these special fences, another 12 inches taller than we ever did, electric wire, all sorts of impermeability. And so I turned to the fellow and I said, well, how did the fences look? Sort of bragging about what Alberto had put together. And he said to me, well, those aren't tall enough. He said, a bison will jump 9 feet over the fence.
Oh, my word.
So that's where we started. We realized that keeping them in would be the secret, right? So you keep the females with the males, right? Otherwise, the males just jump over the fence.
Well, you mentioned buffalo, too, and bison. Is there a difference? Or is it geographic?
Culturally, they're bison. Buffalo are sort of water buffalo, the kind you've always seen that have the curled horn.
Right.
And a lot of people sell that meat as bison meat. But American bison are really, they're sort of certified, recognized difference between a bison and a buffalo. Some people call it buffalo from the old days.
Okay.
But years ago, there were millions, and I don't know if you've read anything about buffalo, but there were millions of buffalo all over the United States.
Oh, sure.
And then the Indians had them, and it was a culturally important thing, and the Americans sort of wiped out the buffalo thinking that they would get rid of the Indians, but it never happened.
It's amazing how majestic and beautiful they are.
They are, and some of these fellows, like in Kansas, they'll have 40,000 acres of just buffalo running wild, right?
That's amazing.
Culturally restoring what's going on.
That's amazing. How many acres do you have, and how many buffalo do you have here?
I forget, 87 was it?
Yeah, something like that, like 85. Wow. Okay. And
About 20 acres.
oh, wow. Okay. So that's not
We'll look at them when we finish talking.
so now, and I'm assuming by bow tie, that's just a nod to your medical practice.
Exactly right. I always wore a bow tie. And my granddaughter, we went out to eat one night, and I said, oh, we've got to be thinking of a name. And so we sat there after dessert, and she said, how about bow tie? And I said, that's it, right? So
Is she still getting royalties from the name? Well,
everybody loves it.
so you've got a farm here, and you've talked about the kids coming up onto the porch and being able to see the animals and look at them, and obviously there's a lot of education that goes there. But you do have a general store here as well. It's called Boomer's Market. Is that a nod to the baby boomers? Or?
No, it's a nod to our first donkey.
Okay.
Our first donkey was named Boomer, and we got that from a local resident down in Harwood. Wonderful lady I knew, and she said, I've got this donkey I want to sell. And I said, okay, and what's his name? She said, Boomer. We brought him up here, so he's always been part of us. And so we got the market, which used to be an old garage that we modified, very old, and made it into a market, and we decided to call it Boomer's Market.
Well, the market itself is a retail aspect of the farm, and it's open very limited hours. I'm going to say it's Thursday mornings,
Thursday
afternoons, and Saturday mornings.
Saturday mornings, right.
Folks can come in here and buy a variety of bison products. In the most basic sense, you can buy a bison steak, burgers, sausages, and everything else, as well as you've got eggs and chicken and pork and everything else that's in there as well. But the difference between what you're going to buy here and what you're going to buy, not that you can buy bisons in the supermarket, but it's just going to be the taste. And I know my uncle had a ranch out in Montana, and I was always looking for the day when we would get that dry ice pack.
So special,
there.
right?
It's unbelievable, the taste difference there. Does bison meat, does that have any healthier aspects to it? I mean, it's a leaner meat, isn't it?
Everybody wants and believes that bison are much healthier because they're raised that way, right? They're raised not giving a little fat propensity food, right? So we grass feed them, and then at the very end, we give them a little grain just to finish them up. And people have done all these studies on animals and their tastes and their protein content. Clearly, bison the best, right? And we have people in the community, young people particularly, who are interested in their bodies, will come and buy the meat because they feel it's better for them as they grow. A lot of adolescents to 30-year-olds, right, come specifically because they want this bison. Tastes great, and but it is leaner. So like when we have burgers, which are a big item, we always suggest you add a little mayonnaise so it gives it a little greasier feel to it. Otherwise, they're pretty dry.
Really? Good tip. I'm going to write that down. Add mayonnaise to the burger there to moisten it up there or something like that. And as far as being able to purchase through here, I know that you can go to the website, which is bowtiebison.com, or you can come here on Thursdays or Saturdays. But I guess the easiest way is probably to order online and come pick it up.
And it'll be ready for you when you come, right? Part of the job. And this is Delia, who runs the business. Delia has taken care of us for years and years, but when we got the bison, she said, I'm really interested in this. And so she spends a lot of time. And we have a number of restaurants now that are ordering. We have about 9 restaurants that get their bison meat from us. And so they'll call for different cuts, and they'll ask for this or that. We had a lady call the other day, and she wanted 2,400 hamburgers. And can I get them by Monday? Well, we couldn't do that, so we had to go and reach out to some of our partners, and we get to know each other. The bison community is pretty well connected, so we could call people up, and they said, oh, yeah, I've got some, and they've got some, and we put together the order for them.
That's fantastic. So, I mean, you're responsive to the local businesses. What restaurants are serving your meat? Do you know?
Harvest Time.
Harvest Time is one of my favorites.
They have 2 or 3 dishes. I went and just to check them out. They have chili and they had lasagna. They've got burgers on the menu all the time.
Harvest Time is one of my favorites. People always ask me, like, what's my favorite restaurants in Annapolis? I said, well, honestly, they're not in Annapolis. There's one in Davidsonville, you had Harvest Time, and up in Crofton at Ashling Kitchen.
Just met them the other day at the Chamber of Commerce meeting.
Great restaurant. Yeah, their backstory is pretty cool too, as far as the rock and roll and everything else. So it's kind of neat there. But it's wonderful if local restaurants are supporting you as well.
And we love it, right? And we had a little thing. Harvest Time had a fall festival where they needed more meat than we could give. So we, again, went to a couple of our associates and we got it from 2 places in ours. And we sent it all over, all blind, so they didn't know where it came from. We told them it came from, but we didn't tell them to.
Which is wit.
And then later, 2 weeks later, the fellow who runs Harvest Time, Rick, wonderful guy, told Dave it was the best one, right?
He picked ours.
There you go.
From North Dakota.
A little win.
Comparing to North Dakota and Michigan, right?
When you say you talk to your partners, I mean, who else is raising bison around here? And is that...
We're the biggest in Maryland. There's another producer up around the Beltway, J&J, but there's nobody doing it like we are. I'm talking about nationally. There's a sort of eastern section, central section, and western section. So like every I think it's December or April, they have a national meeting, and people come from all over the country and talk about the health of the bison. How do you keep them healthy? How do you sustain them? And then there are subgroups that talk about, well, when you have them, what do you do with the meat? How do you retail it? What do you do on your place? And sort of this agriculture tourism is a big thing. And we went to a place I'm trying to think the name of the city in Colorado, where they promote that in Denver and all around, and they have people coming down in big buses to ride on trailers around their bison. And they have a big barbecue at the end of it, right? Agritourism.
That's pretty cool. Well, farming is definitely not for the faint of heart.
It is hard work. We recently moved to Colorado part-time, and we have a ranch out there raising red Angus beef. And when we signed the contract to buy the ranch, the realtor stood on the door and he said, I think you need a cowboy. And I said, you're right, I do need a cowboy. And this fellow showed up with 2 or 3 friends, and it takes them all day. I mean, we're growing hay and harvesting hay. Like yesterday, we did pregnancy checks on all the females to find out whether the babies are going to be born or not. And of the 80, only 3 of them were not pregnant, based on the hard work of making sure there was a bull with the girls whenever they needed it. It's hard work.
So, now, in your menu of items that you sell here, I mean, you do mention beef. Is that coming from Colorado? Is that your...
Well, we brought people from our ranch out here to find out what they're doing, right?
Okay.
Yeah, and up in Colorado, it's sort of a separate culture in a little city.
What's been the most rewarding aspect of this place for you?
Seeing everybody enjoy it so much. I think having my practice in my home was different than anybody else, and I'd had people come to me forever and say, how do you stand that? Don't you hate having your house with a practice in it? And I said, I love it. It allows me to do what I want to do with patients. I can do it when I want to do it. And I felt the patients were more satisfied. And the same thing here. When people come here and they get excited and smile and enjoy themselves.
And sort of a throwback to the practice in the home is sort of a throwback to the old days. I remember my dentist had a separate part of his house that was his, growing up as his office. The doctors, I mean, that used to be the old way to do it. And anymore.
It still is a great way to do it. I mean, people want to know you and know you're a real person, and you want to be available for them. And I think if you believe in the retail model right now of customer satisfaction and relationships, that's the only way to really do it.
Absolutely. Well, okay. You obviously are a bison aficionado. How do you like to prepare it? What's your favorite dish?
Well, clearly the ground meat can go into so many different things, right? And so obviously we give people menus to make bison chili and this type of thing. All the other cuts are not dissimilar from beef, right? And the critical piece different for bison is you have to cook it long and slow, right? And you want to make sure that you slice it thin. If you give a big chunk of bison, it's pretty tough, right? It's not like you go and get a filet mignon, right? Mm-hmm. And so you slice it on the angle thin, but you cook it a long time and you put the right spices on. We have spices that we put together. They're combinations of other people's commercial spices.
So you've got all of the tips for somebody that may not have tried bison.
We try to educate them. Exactly.
You've got the recipes, you've got the spices, and to do it. Grill, best way to do it, slow and long on a grill.
Correct. Yeah.
Fantastic. Well,
grill it on the outside, sort of brown it, and then slow it down.
So with 86 head of bison, are you looking to? Are they called?
In fact, we had a talk about it this week, right? We think we're probably right in the sweet spot of 85 to 100, based on what people are asking us to supply, based on what we can afford to feed, and we feed them different things. I mean, I'll tell you, even though you didn't ask, one of the feeds we give is called corn silage. So you go out in the corn patch, we rent the corn, and then we cut it up. And Alberto goes out there and they cut it up and chop it up so it looks just like a bunch of corn cut up. And we give that. And then the other thing we give is beer from the breweries, the grain that's left over after the brewery. So we pick that up, and that's sweet. Doesn't have as much protein in it. And then in these big silos out here, we have cracked corn. So there's a real diet to it, right? Plus grass, plus all the grass.
And you're also pretty sustainable there. I mean, if you're pulling we'll say the waste out of a brewery.
They love it, right? They don't pay us to take it, but they would if we didn't want it, I think, right?
That's why, now, did your high fences, have they kept them in or did they escape?
We have a metal fence. They always respect that metal fence. It's like a 6 or something feet. But they feel good, they don't go.
So we're no longer having the board fence that looks so pretty. We have these big metal panels that are welded steel, and we'll go over that with you. We bring them in from Texas, and we put them up. And after we got several truckloads and put it up and ran it around the property, Alberto comes to me and he says, "Senor, what is Plan B?"
Another fence.
It's funny. My uncle had a farm up in Pennsylvania, and one of his neighboring farms did raise buffalo or bison. And one time he was over there, and we get a call in the middle of the night from Butch Clemens who says, "Hey, we got one that got out, so keep an eye out for it." And all of a sudden, about 2:00 in the morning, we heard this horrible, sort of bellowing, and we're trying, what is this? So we look out the window, and there it is on the swimming pool. It was in the wintertime.
Oh, on the cover.
That pretty much looks like a trampoline.
Yeah, exactly.
And he couldn't do anything. We're like, wow, okay, speaks very well for the pool cover.
That's the one where they have the elephant in the edge.
Yeah, and ultimately, Butch was actually the chief of the local volunteer fire department. So what they ended up doing is bringing the ladder truck out and getting some slings because because the legs were all splaying out.
Sure,
he couldn't, and it was just sort of okay. We'll get it up and then hauled him back to where he is. So I didn't realize, but they can jump
9 feet. Yeah. They're very awkward. They're very awkward animals. If you look at the rear end, the legs are tiny in the bottom. They're big, strong in the but they can lower themselves down and do that big jump, right?
Do they run and frolic in the fields here?
Oh, if one starts running, they all run. Maybe it'll happen. So one starts, and a bunch of them will start running, and they'll run back and forth. You don't want them to run too much because they run all the profit off their bodies, but
this is just an amazing hidden find here up in Davidsonville. And again, I mean, to get to it, if you're on 424, you would take a left onto Rutland Road, and you'll get to a point after some curves where you'll see like a blinking light on a fence. And if you hit that light, you've gone a little too far.
Just before St. George Barber Road. And the animals are available to see right at St. George Barber and Rutland.
Right. And coming up St. George Barber off of Governor's Bridge, it's a dead end, and there's a sign right there. You just take a quick left and a quick right into the driveway.
What we enjoy most is having people drive by and then a year later say, "I've always enjoyed coming by," like you, right? Oh my gosh, I never, and they see it, and that's why we try to keep all the animals, right?
Fantastic experience. I do recommend everybody jump on this, get out here some Saturday morning or some Thursday afternoon, see what Bowtie Bison has to offer. Check out Boomer's Market.
Be great.
Name for a donkey.
We'd love to have that.
And again, the website is bowtiebison.com. And I want to thank Dr. Bob McGraw so much for your time today. And thanks for bringing this. This is unusual for Anne Arundel County, and it's one of the things that makes it special here.
I think so too.
Thanks for listening to this week's Local Business Spotlight. Please make sure to visit eyeonannapolis.net for all your local news, events, and opinion. And in case you haven't already, please subscribe to the Eye on Annapolis Daily News Brief, where we bring you all the day's local news direct to your phone, tablet, or computer in about 10 minutes. It comes to you at 6 a.m. every Monday through Friday, and you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.